Gentlemen, let me be very, very clear. If the Democratic Party becomes the likes of Zoran Mamdani, who, by the way, I like, I'm not trying to throw any shade on him or anything like that, but if the Democratic Party becomes him, you have no chance. You have no chance on a national basis in terms of the presidency. In Senate seats in the House, you have no chance. You have no chance. I want to be very, very clear about that. You might have a Democratic socialist sprinkled here and there, but that ain't what America is.
Surprisingly, Stephen A. Smith is criticizing the woke left, and I find that quite strange.
America's about capitalism. America's about dollars and cents. America's about an economy, a flourishing economy. Okay? And you know what it's not about? Free stuff.
Pundit Stephen A., a known left-leaning commentator, has openly supported the Democratic Party. I've seen him criticize Republicans while promoting progressive ideas many times, yet it's surprising to watch him turn a critical eye toward his own side. What exactly did Stephen A. say about the left this time? Let's get started.
The Democrats up. Trump is cool now. He's not just the most powerful guy in the world and just made himself like the richest. He's actually kind of at 78.
Yes.
I mean, rappers like him. The athletes are doing, I was making fun of him jerking off two guys at one time. And now he owns it, and they're doing it.
Here's the deal. The man was impeached twice. He was convicted on 34 felony counts. And the American people still said, he's closer to normal than what we see.
Exactly.
Left. That's what they're saying. He's closer to normal. Why? Because something that pertains, when you talk about the transgender community, for example, and you're talking about the issues that pertain to less than 1% of the population, the Democratic Party came across as if that was a priority more so than the other.
It seems the Democratic Party focuses on issues affecting less than 1% of the population. Stephen A. Smith points out that while Trump addressed concerns that genuinely impact most Americans, the DNC has been preoccupied with roughly 1% of the populace. Looking closer, it's hard to disagree. Think back to Biden's last 2 years in office. The news was dominated by identity politics, gender debates, and social issues. Meanwhile, Trump concentrated on matters that touch people's daily lives: public safety, border security, the economy, and America's global standing. Millions of voters, not just a tiny fraction, relate to these concerns. But Stephen A. didn't stop there. He noted that this gap raises questions about who political leaders truly represent today, highlighting the disconnect between Democratic priorities and the issues affecting the majority.
He comes into office, now you're talking about childbirth, citizenship, and what have you. He knows that's not going to pass the mustard, but he knows that he made that promise. So when he shows up week one on Capitol Hill and he says, this is what we're going to do through an executive order, even though it's going to be shot down through the courts and what have you, he's saying, I kept my promise. A lot of other things that he's going to point to that he's going to try to do, I kept my promise. Then you turn around and you look at the left and you say, what promises did you keep? Now, you might know the answer to that. I'm certainly not questioning your knowledge about that at all. What I'm saying is what resonated with the voter. What voter out there can look at the Democratic Party at this moment in time and say there's a voice for...
Few Americans truly feel the Democratic Party represents them. In recent years, the party has often prioritized the interests of a small group over the concerns of everyday citizens. Their apparent strategy was to impress or persuade enough people within this base to secure another 4 years in the White House. But it didn't work. Instead of gaining support, they alienated a large portion of the population who felt ignored. This wasn't a clever political tactic. It exposed a growing divide between the Democratic Party and the majority of Americans whose voices matter most.
That speaks for us, that goes up on Capitol Hill and fights the fights that we want them fighting on our behalf. They didn't do that. And that's why their behinds are home and that man is back into the White House and they want to sit up there and talk. You look at the networks right now, they're talking about him. Look at it. This is the latest. Look at him. Here he goes again. Well, you know what here he goes again means? He's doing what he said he was going to do. He promised you he was going to do these things, and he walked into office week one, and that's exactly what he's doing. And he's saying, y'all do something about it. And when you try to do something about it, he's going to say, look at them now. Now they're concerned about these issues. Were they talking about that during the campaign? Hell no. That's really it.
Stephen A. Smith is spot on. Trump's inaugural promises included clear commitments, a stronger and more stable economy, improved border security, a rebuilt reputation abroad, and leadership that prioritizes ordinary Americans. And he's following through. Unlike many politicians who get bogged down in ideology or cater to small vocal interest groups, Trump focuses on the issues most people care about: national security, job growth, inflation, and America's global standing. By doing so, he shows he's more than just a politician. At the highest levels of government, he represents the everyday American. Millions see him as a leader who listens, acts, and puts the people first.
Let's be honest here. First of all, one could argue that Obama resonated more because the people chose him to be the Democratic nominee for the presidency of the United States of America, as opposed to somebody backdooring their way into that position. Let's just be honest about it. You had Biden. I know that you supported Biden. Obviously, you spoke about his mental acuity and all of that other stuff, but we all saw what we saw. Before the debate on June 27th, when the debate happened, and by the time that was exposed, you then waited 3 weeks after that before he decided to walk away. But it was too late for anybody else to get in. So Kamala Harris, who didn't resonate during the primaries in 2020, couldn't even get to Iowa, suddenly is the Democratic nominee. And then you roll up at the convention in Chicago, and everybody's like, she's a rock star. So it was like, wait a minute, how that happened? I don't know how that happened.
Stephen A. Smith points out another factor behind the DNC's loss last year. Beyond their woke policies, Kamala Harris. She was never particularly popular within the party, and her chances in a national campaign were questioned due to past election losses. Yet, she was chosen as vice president, a decision many see as driven more by diversity and gender considerations than by experience or skill. While symbolically significant, the move drew criticism for prioritizing image over effectiveness. According to Stephen, this choice highlighted a disconnect between Democratic leadership and the electorate, emphasizing identity politics over the real-world issues most Americans face, and ultimately worsened the party's electoral challenges.
You're looking at all of those things and you're saying, yes, I voted for her. A lot of people voted for her. But in the end, we end up feeling like damn fools because we supported it. We fell for the okie doke, as they say. You know she did. If you had a primary, the likelihood is that she would not have been the Democratic nominee. And you can't say that about Trump in this side.
The Democratic Party faces a simple yet tough question. Who among them has Trump's charisma, charm, and broad appeal? Some might suggest Manny, but his socialist views are unlikely to resonate with most Americans who prefer practical solutions. Others might mention AOC, yet her radical progressivism echoes the traits that made Kamala Harris unpopular. Even well-known figures face criticism, especially over handling California's issues. The party's main problem is clear: they lack a candidate who can connect with mainstream America and inspire the same enthusiasm. Without a skilled, relatable, and politically capable leader, they risk repeating past mistakes and losing public support.
To the Republicans, to the conservatives out here, and what they did in this last election. Again, I did not vote for Donald Trump, but I got to tell you something. I'm not mad he won. I'm not mad he won because when I see, especially in the aftermath of the election, some of the things that transpired with the Democratic Party, you know, in an effort to manipulate the election and the vote, it really ticked me off. When you hear people talking about practical things, and then I saw folks on the left basically trying to guilt me into voting for you. It bothered me. I might have ended up voting for Kamala Harris because I didn't like how Trump acts. But what I didn't do was call him a racist. I didn't call him a Nazi. I knew Trump before he ran for president.
Yeah.
We talked on the phone. We talk at basketball games or boxing events. I knew this man. And so some of the things that were being said about him, I knew were not true. And I was saying, come on, y'all, that you got to do better.
Stephen A. Smith highlights another major issue with the Democratic Party and its media supporters: the constant demonization of Donald Trump. He is often labeled reckless, polarizing, or unfit for office, while the media exaggerates his flaws and downplays his achievements. Yet, those who have worked closely with him or know him personally often see a different side: strategic, determined, and attuned to the issues ordinary Americans face. Stephen points out that this gap between perception and reality misleads the public and reflects the partisan lens through which Trump is viewed. Ultimately, it raises serious questions about the objectivity and accuracy of political reporting today.
If the Democratic Party becomes the likes of Zohran Mamdani, who, by the way, I like, I'm not trying to throw any shade on him or anything like that, but if the Democratic Party becomes him, you have no chance. You have no chance on a national basis in terms of the presidency. In Senate seats in the House, you have no chance. You have no chance. I want to be very, very clear about that. You might have a Democratic Socialist sprinkled here and there, but that ain't what America is.
Stephen A. Smith is spot on. If Meany is chosen as the Democratic Party's national candidate, it could be disastrous for the DNC. Many Americans are hesitant to embrace ideas disconnected from their daily concerns and aren't ready for a full socialist agenda. The recent elections offer clear lessons. Extreme ideological positions, no matter how well-intentioned, risk alienating the majority. Yet, the DNC continues to push progressive and woke policies despite repeated warnings from the public, analysts, and critics. It wouldn't be surprising if Meany were still selected. Another bold choice prioritizing ideology over electability. In Stephen's view, this would only widen the party's gap with mainstream America and set Democrats up for yet another national political setback.
It's about capitalism. America's about dollars and cents. America's about an economy, a flourishing economy. Okay? And you know what it's not about? Free stuff.
Most Americans believe hard work is preferable to relying on expansive social programs or socialist-style handouts. This makes it risky for Democrats to back a candidate like Meany. History has repeatedly shown socialism's pitfalls. Financial losses, civil unrest, and public dissatisfaction have followed every attempt. Americans are aware of this and want to avoid repeating such mistakes. Choosing Meany isn't just a calculated gamble for the Democratic Party. It could jeopardize the entire 2028 election. By promoting a candidate tied to policies the majority rejects, Democrats may be setting themselves up for an avoidable defeat.
Even Biden, who was a terrible
That's what
president.
I was getting ready to go there. Ask you about Biden. Your
Yeah, I
thoughts
don't
about
think he
Biden.
was-
'Cause you had him as your
he's a
second
wicked
worst.
man.
You had him as your second worst president. Is that correct?
Yeah, and he was lucky he got second because the Civil War is pretty big. But Biden was, and you're going to see over time how bad he actually was. Now, he's going to have an asterisk next to his name. It's going to say, well, he might not have known what he was doing. And that's a medical condition. And that might be an excuse, but boy, he was bad.
Claims Republicans were essentially handed an advantage during Biden's administration. He sees Biden's 4 years as one of the most challenging periods in U.S. history, second only to the Civil War. According to him, dysfunction and uncertainty from economic instability to rising domestic and international tensions left Americans frustrated, anxious, and eager for change. He argues Biden's missteps did more than erode trust. They created the perfect opening for Republicans to reclaim the presidency. Americans wanted stability, strength, and clarity after what many saw as 4 years of decline, and they believed Trump could deliver. In the end, millions of voters, Stephen A. Smith and O'Reilly, all point to the same reality. The Democratic Party's focus on identity politics, woke policies, and unpopular candidates has driven voters away, while ordinary Americans responded to Trump's emphasis on security, the economy, and national stability. If the DNC continues down this path, especially with candidates like Meany, it risks another major defeat. That wraps up today's video. To see more like this, click like and subscribe.